Tonight, Donald Trump facing criminal charges, a first in U.S. history. The former president indicted by a New York grand jury.
This is an unprecedented moment.
In a case centered on alleged hush money to an adult film star.
It's so flagrant. It's so crazed.
The push for sweeping changes in the aftermath of Canada's worst mass shooting.
Nothing will bring my brother back. We have to take and move things forward.
The focus on the failings of the RCMP in the Nova Scotia rampage.
I know our response wasn't what you needed it to be.
Plus, break-ins at the homes of two top aides to the Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, his national security advisor, and the incidents under investigation.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with an unprecedented moment in history and the first time a former U.S. president has faced criminal charges. This evening, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office says it contacted Donald Trump's attorney to coordinate his surrender. Guidance will be provided when the arraignment date is selected. There are reports that could happen next week, but police in New York are already ramping up security for potential protests, ordering all NYPD officers, regardless of rank, to be on duty starting at 7 a.m. tomorrow, ready to deploy. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbon starts us off tonight with Trump's response and what's next.
Donald Trump predicted his own arrest off by 2 weeks. A Manhattan grand jury voting late today behind closed doors to indict Trump, the first former president ever to face criminal charges. In a statement tonight, Trump said this is political persecution and election interference at the highest level in history. It involves business payments to silence adult film star Stormy Daniels, who claimed she was paid off about their alleged affair during the 2016 presidential election. A parade of witnesses, including Trump's former fixer and lawyer Michael Cohen, testified, claiming he made the payments at Trump's direction to silence Daniels. Trump denies it.
At the end of the day, Donald Trump needs to be held accountable for his dirty deeds if, in fact, that's the way that the facts play out.
Trump, who plans to run for president again, urged his supporters to protest, threatening the district attorney Alvin Bragg and warning on social media of death and destruction if he's charged. New York police have stepped up security around the courthouse as Trump is expected to surrender as early as next week. He'll be processed, fingerprinted, even a mugshot. His son raging at the news.
This is like communist level shit. This is stuff that would make Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, it would make them blush. It's so flagrant. It's so crazed.
The twice impeached former president faces multiple investigations, from his role in the January 6th insurrection, election interference in Georgia, to the discovery of classified documents at his home in Florida.
The hush money payments, falsifying business documents were considered less serious, but we don't really know the exact charges. They remain secret and under seal. Omar?
All of this, Joy, happening just days after Trump held his first 2024 presidential campaign rally in Waco, Texas. How does this development impact his attempt to get back into the White House?
Well, you know, Donald Trump has said all along, if he's charged, it will not stop him from taking a run at the White House again. Polls show that he's still the Republican frontrunner, and he's using this indictment to drum up support. And yes, he's using it to cash in. Trump is raising money off the indictment for his legal defense. It is a remarkable moment, Omar.
Certainly historic. Joy Malbon in Washington tonight. Joy, thanks. Back in this country, the worst mass shooting in Canadian history has now led to official calls for sweeping changes to both gun laws and the RCMP. 22 people were killed during a 13-hour-long rampage in Nova Scotia in 2020. Now, an inquiry into those deaths has delivered its recommendations. They were killed by a gunman dressed as a police officer and driving a mock cruiser. CTV's Atlantic Bureau Chief Creason Adjkate on the findings.
The mass casualty final report released a massive 3,000-page blueprint meant to bring systemic change.
We are calling for major changes to RCMP oversight, processes, and culture.
The report documents mass confusion and chaos from the RCMP over the 13 hours the gunman ran loose in central Nova Scotia. RCMP officers didn't know where to go, couldn't communicate with each other, didn't properly warn the public or evacuate civilians from a hot zone. And on the night of the shootings, the RCMP received 3 911 calls identifying the gunman, that he was dressed as an officer and driving the mock RCMP vehicle, but that information was discounted. 12 hours later, the public was notified about the mock vehicle only in a tweet.
I'm terribly sorry for the pain and suffering that the families went through. It was unprecedented circumstances. You've heard the Commissioner McDonald earlier saying it's the worst case of mass killing in Canada.
The Commission also said the RCMP has lacked accountability for years, showing an incapacity to respond quickly, publicly, or effectively to acknowledge, seek, to understand, and rectify its mistakes or shortcomings. Adding, the RCMP must admit to making mistakes moving forward.
It's not a matter of can they must.
Among the 130 recommendations, the Commission wants a ban on semi-automatic handguns and rifles, any firearms with a magazine that holds more than 5 rounds, set limits on stockpiling ammunition, and revoke the firearms license of anyone convicted of gender-based intimate partner or family violence. The Prime Minister was in Nova Scotia and promised change will come.
There's no question there need to be changes, and there will be, but we will take the time to get those right.
Family members are relieved the report is completed, ready for the next step.
The old saying, put a bug in his ear, and that's what I'm hoping for of meeting with Mr. Trudeau.
I am glad this part of it is over, but I would tell you that I'm feeling like this is just the beginning.
The interim RCMP commissioner said he will respond to the report, including how to respond to rural policing, reform its management culture, and modernizing its training. Omar.
All right, Creason, thank you. In that 3,000-page document is a recommendation that may have some unexpected repercussions in Saskatchewan. The commission says the RCMP Academy in Regina should be phased out and replaced with a policing degree program.
We're obviously going to have a look into all of the recommendations that are coming from this. I don't know whether they'd be ultimately implemented.
The Depot Division has been the training ground for RCMP recruits since 1885. There is late word tonight that the bodies of 6 people, including a child, were located in a marsh area, according to Akwesasne Mohawk Police in Quebec, who are investigating. The discovery was made with the help of the Canadian Coast Guard. Police are waiting for the results of a post-mortem to determine the cause of death. A positive prognosis tonight for Pope Francis. Doctors at Rome's Gemelli Hospital say the 86-year-old's condition has improved after he was admitted yesterday. He's received antibiotics for a bronchitis infection, and the Vatican says could be released in the next few days. In a tweet, Francis said he's touched by the many messages he's received and is grateful for the closeness and prayer. The Vatican also made news today for another reason. In a historic statement, it denounced a centuries-old doctrine and the associated papal decrees that had been used to legitimize the colonial-era seizure of Indigenous land. But as CTV's Donna Sound reports, critics believe the formal rejection does not bring resolution.
Indigenous people have long been calling on the Catholic Church to repudiate the 500-year-old Doctrine of Discovery, even hanging a banner during the Pope's visit to Canada last summer. The doctrine had a detrimental effect on the lives of Indigenous people, negatively controlling them. It came from a series of 15th century papal bulls that justified the discovery and dominance by European Christians of lands already inhabited by Indigenous people.
The document doesn't attempt to say, and that's that, and we'll have no more of that, thank you. No, it acknowledges that dealing with such a painful heritage is an ongoing process.
Reaction to today's announcement is mixed.
This might be as close as it gets to apology, but I also think there's probably some serious resistance within the Vatican, which might be a worry.
The Vatican now says the doctrine didn't reflect the equal dignity and rights of Indigenous peoples. Cody Grote is Mohawk and assistant professor of history and Indigenous studies at Western University, says it's more a symbolic gesture.
But it is a turning point in the fact that these principles, which were used to uphold this entire system of colonialism, have now been formally repudiated by the Catholic Church, who first imposed them.
But rejecting or repudiating is not the same as rescinding. Cree lawyer Donald Warm says Indigenous leadership must step up.
We have leadership in this country that will seize upon this moment and assert sovereignty with respect to the lands and resources that have been denied to Indigenous people in Canada for far too long.
Pope Francis said sorry for the harms done to residential school survivors in Rome and when he was in Canada last year. Today's announcement is recognition that Indigenous people are a sovereign people and that the whole ideology behind these colonial enterprises was flawed. Omar?
All right, Donna, thank you for this tonight. And joining me now is former Assembly of First Nations National Chief Phil Fontaine. Mr. Fontaine, thank you so much for being here. Clearly a profound symbolic victory for Indigenous groups, but does the Vatican's move go far enough in repairing the relationship? Should there be restitution?
We weren't particularly interested in restitution when we engaged with the church to talk to them about the apology. But if you're talking about restitution in terms of land back, there's a lot of church property in Canada that is located on Indigenous lands. If we're talking about language retrieval, that's another major issue. Cultural practices. So I don't know if you can put a dollar figure on those issues, but restitution in a general sense, yes, that might be another unfinished matter with the church.
Aside from the symbolism, what do you think the practical impact of this repudiation could be?
If we're looking at the current situation, unresolved land issues is a major challenge for our country, and this statement may help in resolving many outstanding land issues, but that's a responsibility for the Canadian government.
All right, Mr. Fontaine, thank you so much for your perspective tonight. A retired priest accused of the indecent assault of a residential school survivor more than 50 years ago has been acquitted. A Winnipeg judge said she could not determine beyond a reasonable doubt that the now 93-year-old Arthur Massé was the person who committed the assault, but she did believe the victim was assaulted by someone. A new security concern in Ottawa tonight centered around members of the Prime Minister's inner circle. CTV News has learned police have investigated break-ins at the homes of Justin Trudeau's chief of staff and his national security advisor. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor broke this story and has the exclusive details. Glenn.
Omar, Jody Thomas regularly updates the Prime Minister on intelligence and matters of national security. But the incident last weekend concerns Jody Thomas's own security. Police have canvassed neighbors looking for doorbell camera video that might show a suspect who allegedly attempted to enter the home. This comes after another break-in shortly before Christmas at the home of Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford. Now, like most cities, there are lots of break-ins in Ottawa, and there's no indication that either advisor was targeted or that these events are related. But still, security has been increased. Both Thomas and Telford have high profiles. They gave evidence at the inquiry into the Emergencies Act last year. Thomas appeared at a parliamentary committee studying foreign interference earlier this month, and Telford will also be giving testimony on the topic in coming weeks. The spokesperson for the Prime Minister's office said these are private, personal matters and declined further comment. Although both advisors are in the public eye, neither has RCMP protection like the Prime Minister does. Omar.
All right, Glenn, thank you. Actor Gwyneth Paltrow has won her high-profile court case over a crash in a Park City, Utah ski hill.
Was Gwyneth Paltrow at fault? No.
A jury found her not responsible for injuries 76-year-old Terry Sanderson claimed he received. He was suing for $300,000. Paltrow was awarded the dollar she was seeking in damages. As the actress left court, Sanderson says Paltrow told him, "I wish you well." Coming up, an American journalist imprisoned in Russia.
It's always about extorting concessions from the U.S. government.
The White House hits back over allegations of espionage. Plus, what a Canadian superstar may want with the Ottawa Senators. Tonight, for the first time, 911 calls reveal the agony inside the Nashville school during Monday's tragic mass shooting, and a warning some might find the audio disturbing.
Did you see the shooter? Yes, it seems to be your description. All I saw was a man holding an assault rifle shooting through the door.
One of the frantic calls was from a teacher hiding with students in the art room.
Yes, I hear another shot.
You did?
I'm hearing more shots.
Okay.
And in the background, the heartbreaking voice of a child. The massacre has reignited the fierce debate on gun control. Today, this heated exchange between a Republican and Democratic congressman.
Children are dying.
I know, I've got
9-year-old children.
We've got guns here to protect us, and he doesn't believe the kids should have somebody to protect them.
3 students and 3 staff members lost their lives at the Covenant School. U.S. military investigators in southwestern Kentucky are looking into the cause of a training disaster involving 2 Army helicopters that killed 9 soldiers. They were on board Black Hawk medical evacuation choppers that crashed during a routine exercise last night. This man heard the crash and ran to help.
Heard a loud boom and two small booms, and all of a sudden the engine shut down, and I told my neighbor, I said, they have crashed.
The Army hasn't confirmed whether the 2 helicopters collided. All of the victims were based at Fort Campbell. Tensions between the United States and Russia are nearing a dangerous tipping point tonight after Moscow arrested an American journalist and accused him of spying. The first time a U.S. correspondent has been detained on such accusations since the Cold War. Here's CTV's Richard Madden.
Hours after Russian police arrested American journalist Evan Gershkovich, the White House responded with harsh condemnation.
This espionage charges are ridiculous. The targeting of American citizens by Russian government is unacceptable.
The Moscow-based journalist with the Wall Street Journal was detained in a secret hearing with no access to diplomats or his lawyer. The FSB accuses him of collecting information constituting a state secret about the activities of one of the enterprises of the Russian military-industrial complex. The Wall Street Journal vehemently denies the allegations from the FSB and seeks the immediate release of our trusted and dedicated reporter.
It sounds very similar to what happened to Paul from the arrest, from the way the FSB or the security services announced it on their website.
David Whalen says their tactics are painfully familiar. His brother Paul was jailed 5 years ago on Russian espionage charges he fiercely denies.
It's an old playbook.
What do you think the Russians are really plotting here?
I think it's always about extorting concessions from the U.S. government.
Gershkovich is the first American journalist arrested on spying charges in Russia since the Cold War. It comes amid escalating tensions since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the recent prisoner swap of WNBA star Brittany Griner for arms dealer Victor Bout, prompting new accusations that the Kremlin is using Americans as leverage again.
As a way of just ramping up pressure on the West, signaling that Moscow is going to use whatever tools it has, including essentially hostage-taking.
And Gershkovich has pleaded not guilty. He returns to court in May. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. And tonight, the State Department is urging all Americans in Russia to leave for their own safety. Richard Madden, CTV News, Washington.
Still ahead, the neighbors causing a nuisance without even being home.
I need some help from the city.
An abandoned eyesore in an upscale Toronto neighborhood. King Charles made history today as the first British monarch to address the German parliament.
We are still admiring of each other's culture, dependent upon each other's economies, and inspired by each other's ideas.
The speech, in both English and German, focused on renewing ties post-Brexit. A Toronto man is facing a property problem tonight. The house next door is falling apart, but the owners are nowhere to be found.
I feel really annoyed about it. I feel that I need some help from the city.
From a rundown roof to the crumbling porch, The abandoned property isn't just an eyesore, it's also become home to raccoons and squirrels, which are making their way to neighboring houses. The city has posted violation notices and laid charges, but haven't located the owners who vanished 8 years ago. Another sign that spring is here is the start of a new Major League Baseball season, and for the first time since 1968, all 30 clubs were in action on opening day, including Canada's team, the Toronto Blue Jays.
And he got him.
Canadian pitcher Jordan Romano saved the day for the Jays in the ninth as they came back to beat St. Louis 10-9.
A time violation on the pitcher.
One of the new rules this year is the introduction of a pitch clock to speed up games. After the break,
you couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, he'd bring a lot to the city for sure.
A high-profile visit and the potential play for Ottawa's hockey team. One of Canada's historic NHL franchises is up for sale. And as CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver tells us, an actor's visit to the capital has sparked speculation.
I've had to really search my soul on this one.
He's one of the most famous A-list celebrities, a Marvel hero born in Vancouver with countless TV and film credits.
Captain Khakis, come here.
And soon, Ryan Reynolds,
The Deadpool leading man, Ryan Reynolds,
may add owner of the Ottawa Senators to his name.
I think it'd be exciting, bring a lot of attention to the team.
I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better. I mean, he'd bring a lot to the city for sure.
The Hollywood actor is already making Ottawa friends in high places, meeting today with Mayor Mark Sutcliffe and the president of the Remington Group, who has reportedly put in a bid to buy the storied but struggling Sens.
He talked about the potential for the Senators to be a global brand and for this to be the beginning of something really special for our community.
Last November, Reynolds surprised fans at a game, and in return, he got a standing ovation. The NHL is excited too and has said they want him involved. This kind of buzz doesn't happen every day.
I think he wants to have an office in the corner and be here from time to time and play a role in this franchise. I think he looks at this chance here to say he can not only put this team on a national stage, he can put it on a global stage.
There are about 6 interested buyers left in the game, and many believe Reynolds, who just sold Mint Mobile for $1.3 billion and is credited with turning around the scrappy Welsh soccer team Wrexham FC, will be part of the Sens' storybook ending that Jonathan Gilman has already written.
I'll be the most rabid, foam-spitting fan. I'll bring in celebrities. You know I can.
Fans will have to wait a little bit longer to find out whether Reynolds is part of Ottawa history, with an ownership announcement not expected until early to midsummer. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News, Ottawa.
A few more months to go, and that's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather Wright will be here tomorrow for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching, and good night.